We're joined by Dr. Porat, who is an academic at Monash University and research associate here at AIJAC. Ran, I'm wondering if you can shed a little bit of light as to the developments we've seen in the past 24 hours. There's obviously been a lot of action between Israel and Gaza. We've seen shock aerial offensive from Israel. Bibi has said that any future negotiations with Hamas will only be conducted under fire. We've seen the elimination of several Hamas and PIJ operatives. What do you make of all of this?
First of all, we have to discuss the timeline. Why now?
Yes.
So let's think about it there's two different time speeds here, right? So the first one is the immediate one. Concrete evidence or concrete information, intel, was indicating that Hamas was getting ready for a major attack, that threat was imminent, and that the Israeli army had to work quickly to stave off this problem and sort of counter-strike or preemptive strike on that rolling terror attack.
When you say attack, you mean like a large scale, another October 7th style?
It's a mini October 7th, but yes, it's the same idea of an invasion into neighboring Israeli cities and towns. So, or the IDF soldiers inside the strip. So that's the immediate timeline that had to be addressed immediately. But in the long run, or the longer run, is what happened since the beginning of the ceasefire, the current ceasefire, which is Hamas was using the ceasefire and the benefits it got from the ceasefire, most notably the flow of aid, to rebuild itself financially. For instance, by taking over the aid, reselling it, taking over the fuel and stocking it, taking over the mess. There was a lot of chaos in Gaza, so they sent their people to allegedly organize things, to show their authority. So that's one aspect. The other aspect is actually because so many Gazans are, especially youngsters, because of the war, they are unemployed, they're looking for something to do, and so on. They recruited up to 25,000 new people, or that's the force right now estimated, started retraining them with weapons that they smuggled inside the aid and other ways, preparing them for defense in case that Israel does resume the war, planting across the strip explosive devices, putting on their cameras, refreshing the guidelines, or redeploying a network of spies, people observing what the movements of the Israeli forces, etc., etc., etc. So the bottom line is that Hamas was rebuilding itself, or is in the process of rebuilding itself, and that's a trajectory to better position themselves when the negotiations for a permanent ceasefire sometime in the future might happen. Then they'll be in a better position or a better position than they are now, which is at a very weak point.
We've also seen recently the appointment of a new IDF Chief of Staff, Eyal Zamir. To what extent, in your mind, is his appointment played a part in this operation?
Yeah, so Eyal Zamir, the story around Eyal Zamir is that he is like a different kind of officer, of Chief of Staff, right? He's more on the offense. He's not a defensive in his nature.
Right.
And that he's brought into the army to, correct all the problems that the army were exposed on October 7th and afterwards. So he brings, it's a bigger hammer, right? So when he stepped into, or started his job alongside Herzi Halevi until Herzi Halevi finished his position as the Chief of Staff, he asked to review the plans for resumption of war in Gaza. And he asked to have them more with a bang, right? More with an impact, and to put in more effort into quality intelligence to pinpoint the officials, the Hamas officials, the Hamas operatives, the Hamas weapons depots, the Hamas soft spots. So when the army is ordered to go ahead with a strike, which they did, which they were ordered, then it will come in a flash. It will be like a major impact. It will be like what the Americans called in Iraq shock and awe, with a lot of shock. Mega strike, quickly surprise strike with lots of impact that leave Hamas second-guessing its ability to continue with sort of stretching the time and not starting to be flexible in the negotiations.
So that's really key to the IDF strategy in this.
That is one of the lessons of October 7th, is that you cannot wait and you cannot be forgiven to a threat that is unfolding in front of your eyes. You have to nip it at the bud. You have to be aggressive with your strategy, your on-the-ground strategy or tactics in stopping a threat before it becomes a problem. So that's the same idea. We will not wait for Hamas to rearm itself to a position where they can actually do harm. We'll attack now and leave it weakened.
In terms of hostage negotiations, we've been at a stalemate since the conclusion of phase 1 of the ceasefire, which ended on March 1. We still have 59 hostages that remain in Gaza, 24 of whom are considered to be alive. There's considerable fear amongst the families of hostages as to the impact of this operation on the well-being and the desire to bring home as many live hostages as possible. How do you think Israel would have weighed that risk with the strategy of going in on an aerial bombardment?
It's such a delicate and complicated decision to make, right? How do you weigh in how do you factor in the risk to somebody's life, an Israeli, when you're the Israeli army? I think it's a very heavy decision. I know that the government has taken a sort of two vector approach. So one is guiding the army. There's special debates and meetings and whatnot with Netanyahu himself about what is the best tactic on the ground to avoid or to minimize risk to the lives of hostages. That's one aspect. The other avenue is the strong messages coming out of Israel to Hamas. If you harm any of our hostages, the cost will be enormous. And one of the things that was floating around is that Israel is actually threatening that if a hostage is being killed deliberately by Hamas, then they will consider annexing parts of the Gaza Strip. And Hamas values two things. First and foremost, its own survival. But second, from a nationalistic point of view, from their own national point of view, is that losing actual land. So that could be a very, very painful position from their, or very cost to pay from their position. And backing that, by the way, is not only the US government moral position that Hamas should safeguard and release the hostages, but also voices from inside the Israeli government that are talking about resettling Gaza. So when Israel threatens that, there is a real weight behind it. It's not just, it is not seen, at least from the Hamas side, as just talk. It's actual threat that are serious. So
what will be Hamas's strategy moving forward?
I can only tell you what I read Hamas speakers or Hamas spokespeople are saying. And naturally, they openly speak about this is horrible and whatnot, and we'll stand up for our rights and defend ourselves. But behind closed doors, what they tell the mediators, especially Egypt, is that they want a ceasefire, and they want to end this because they know and they feel that they're at a much lower point that they've ever been to. And they are actually so much wishing for that ceasefire that they talk the way I don't remember ever them speaking like that. Because for somebody looking from outside, they seem like they're even begging for Israel to come back to the negotiation table. At the same time, they will not be quick in releasing hostages, because it's the only thing that is used or is viewed by them, from their perspective, as the insurance policy.
The bargaining chip.
The bargaining chip. The only bargaining chip. What do they have to bargain for?
So that's why we haven't seen them agree to a ceasefire before now.
That's why we haven't seen them agreeing to the release of more hostages. Because the hostages left under their control are the only things they have to offer. Other than that, they have nothing to offer to the negotiation. There's nothing to bring to the negotiation. Nobody wants them. Nobody likes them. even the Arab states wanted them go, and in the discussions between the mediators, especially the Egyptians and the U.S. government, it was agreed that Hamas should not be a part of the reconstruction procedure that will happen once a ceasefire, a long run ceasefire is achieved.
And yet, if you look at the international media coverage of the last 24 hours, many headlines have led with Israel has broken the ceasefire and the numbers of Palestinian casualties, which is tragic, obviously. But in your mind, what is missing from this narrative?
Something very crucial. Prime Minister Netanyahu said in the briefing, both in Hebrew and in English, that Israel is not out for Palestinian civilians. He actually asked Palestinians in Gaza to stay away from Hamas for their own safety. That is something that is missed, that is not, it's omitted from reports and from the responses we come to expect from the usual suspects saying that Israel is horrible. It's so complicated when Hamas embeds itself inside the population, especially now, because the population is, many of them are actually concentrated in one place, and Hamas is operates within those areas. How do you safeguard the population? You do what Israel is doing, giving warning, dropping leaflets telling Gazans to stay away from specific locations, and openly saying, we don't want to hurt you. So I don't think any army could do more than what the Israeli army has been doing in that context.
Just finally, where to from here? What do you expect to play out in the coming days and weeks?
So I hope that in coming days, Israel will get what it must get, which is a reasonable, mature, feasible formula from Hamas, or with the pressure put on Hamas for resuming the ceasefire, and most notably the release of hostages, because that's the primary concern. The life of the hostages, every day that passes, they are at more and more risk, especially because now the fighting is resumed. So that's what I'm hoping for, and I think I see an avenue leading towards that, because as I said, Hamas wants it, and Israel will now come from a stronger point because of the resumption of the attacks, and because Hamas understands that Israel is not only sending out empty threats, it's actually acting on those threats, and it's serious. Hamas needs to step up in order to stop this from happening, or from the war to escalate, because the 100% of the responsibility is on Hamas in that case. They could have avoided that. Israel was actually waiting for more offers and was putting on the table the Witkoff offer and other plans. Hamas rejected them. They were playing for time, which is what led them to that point.
Dr. Porat, thank you for joining us and for sharing your insights with us today.
Thank you, Rebecca.